Time magazine called him the unsung hero behind the internet. CNN called him a father of the internet. President Bill Clinton called him one of the great minds of the information age. He has been voted history's greatest scientist of African descent. He is Philip Emeagwali. He's coming to Trinidad and Tobago to launch the 2008 Kwame Ture lecture series on Sunday, June 8th at the JFK Auditorium, St. Augustine, 5 p.m. The Emancipation Support Committee invites you to come and hear this inspirational mind address the theme, crossing new frontiers to conquer today's challenges. This lecture is one you cannot afford to miss. Admission is free, so be there on Sunday, June 8th, 5 p.m. at the JFK Auditorium, St. Augustine.
For 2 millennia, the name computer remains the same. However, the basic premise that defined the fastest computer has changed. It changed from the supercomputer that computed only one thing at a time or in sequence to the supercomputer that solved millions of problems across millions of processors and at once or in parallel and in a one problem to one processor corresponded manner. The supercomputer continuously redefined itself just as each generation of supercomputer scientists redefined itself. For simplicity and uniformity, and to avoid being a prisoner of details, I use the word computer to describe computing machineries that my generation also called CPUs or processors, nodes or cores, parallel computers or quantum computers, microcomputers or supercomputers, and so on. What does a supercomputer look like? A supercomputer needs email wires that total 200 miles of cables. A supercomputer can consume 5,000 gallons of water per minute and do so to stay cool. A supercomputer can consume as much electricity as 10,000 homes. A supercomputer can weigh as much as a commercial airplane. Parallel processing is the vital technology that powers the world's most powerful supercomputers. The use of parallel processing to solve the toughest problems is limited to the imagination of supercomputer scientists of tomorrow. What is parallel processing? Imagine that 200 million Nigerians were invited to queue in only one line and to vote at the rate of one voter per minute. This process will take 200 million minutes or 380 years, allowing only one person to vote at a time and only at one polling station is akin to solving only one problem at a time and only at one processor. This sequential processing technology was the basic knowledge behind the old one processor technology that powered the old supercomputers, including the conventional supercomputers of the 1940s, through the vector supercomputers of the 1980s. On the 4th of July 1989, I discovered practical parallel processing, and I discovered it as the vital technology that now underpins every supercomputer and hopefully will underpin every computer. The incorporation of parallel processing technology into every supercomputer is the reason the supercomputer that was formerly the size of the refrigerator now occupies the space of a soccer field. I believe that a word that has been used for 2,000 years is likely to be used for another 2,000 years. The word computer was in human vocabulary for 2,000 years. The word computer could remain in our descendants' vocabulary for another 2,000 years. But the computer of 2,000 years from today is expected to be vastly different from the computer of today. I believe that by the end of the 21st century, that our children's children will develop a new internet technology that will encapsulate the internet that I invented as processors that encircled a globe and did so in the manner the internet encircles planet Earth. That new internet will be a new supercomputer that will be a subset of the entire planetary-sized internet. The computer has always been and could always be a machinery that is used to perform the fastest computations and that solves the most computation-intensive problems and solve them automatically and sometimes in parallel. By definition and by necessity, the supercomputer of the future will be the planetary-sized computer that performs the fastest computations. I believe that in a century, the internet will become the network of humans that will be directly wired into the internet and that automatically sends and receives the fastest telepathic email communications as opposed to a network of only processors and computers that it is today. Parallel processing is the crown jewel inside every supercomputer. Parallel processing was the stone that was marked as rough and unsightly and rejected. Parallel processing originated as a vague science fiction story that was dated February 1, 1952. From 1958 to 1989, the usefulness of the parallel supercomputing was debated in computer science literature. Parallel processing was the stone the builders of supercomputers rejected as rough and unsightly, only for it to become the crown jewel inside every supercomputer. My discovery of practical parallel supercomputing that occurred on the 4th of July, 1989, made the news headlines because that new knowledge was considered to be a paradigm shift or a change in the way we look at what makes the supercomputer super. In the old way, called sequential processing or vector processing, the supercomputer had only one electronic brain. In my new way, called parallel processing, the supercomputer is powered by 65,536 brains and can be powered by 1 billion brains. That was how I invented the Philip Emeagwali formula for the world's fastest supercomputer that then US President Bill Clinton described in his White House speech of August 26, 2000. My signature invention was the fastest supercomputer that was not a computer per se, but that was a new internet de facto, that was a new global network of 65,536 processors that were tightly coupled to each other, that were equal distances apart from each other, that shared nothing between each other. Each processor operated its own operating system. The discovery of the new knowledge that is used to make the fastest computer super that occurred on the 4th of July 1989 was my Eureka Moment. My contribution to the development of the computer is this. I answered a grand challenge question that was posed 67 years earlier, back on February 1, 1922. My invention timeline was this. Back in 1970 in Nigeria, I computed with a slide rule or a manually operated computer. Then on June 20, 1974, at 1800 Southwest Campus Way, Corvallis, Oregon, United States, I began programming an automatic programmable supercomputer that was rated at 1 million instructions per second and ranked as the world's fastest supercomputer when it was manufactured back in December 1965. That supercomputer was only automatic within only one processor. The Philip Emeagwali formula that then US President Bill Clinton spoke about on August 26, 2000 was my discovery that we can solve a grand challenge initial boundary value problem that is the toughest and the most important problem in science and engineering, and solve them automatically both within and across each processor of my new internet, that is a new global network of 65,536 processors that were tightly coupled to each other. My contribution to the development of the supercomputer is this. I discovered how to make the supercomputers of the 1940s through 80s to become obsolete. Within the new supercomputer that I discovered on the 4th of July 1989, 65,536 processors replaced the singular processor that computed alone. I invented practical parallel supercomputing, and I did so in 2 stages. First, I programmed all my 2 raised to the power 16, or 65,536 processors to automatically send and receive my emailed codes and data, and do so across 16 times as many email wires, and to communicate with each of my 64 binary thousand processors. Second, I programmed each processor to automatically compute and do so simultaneously and across all 65,536 processors that uniformly encircled a globe as a new internet and encircled the globe in the manner computers encircle the earth. An internet is a global network of processors that encircles a globe. That internet might occupy the space of a soccer field or might encircle the earth itself. That internet might be a supercomputer de facto or might be the internet itself per se. The technology defines the name, not the name defines the technology. For my discovery of practical parallel supercomputing that occurred on the 4th of July 1989, that subsequently made the news headlines, I defined my globe the way mathematicians prefer, namely as a 16-dimensional hypersphere within a 16-dimensional hyperspace. I visualized the 2 raised to the power 16 or 64 binary thousand processors that I programmed and used to solve grand challenge problems as being equal distances apart and distributed across the 15-dimensional hypersurface of that hypersphere. In contrast to my neatly organized and interconnected processors, the computers that outline the internet, that encircle the earth, were added organically and incrementally and are non-identical to each other and non-equidistant from each other. And as a result of those irregularities and non-uniformities, the email communications between the computers on the internet must be asynchronously sent and received, And for that reason, the internet itself cannot be harnessed and used to solve the grand challenge initial boundary value problems that is a recurring decimal in extreme scale mathematics and computational physics. The email messaging within my supercomputer is processor to processor emailing, not your everyday person to computer to person emailing. I discovered practical parallel supercomputing when I figured out how to automatically program across my new internet and how to communicate synchronously while computing simultaneously and doing both as the precondition for recording the fastest computation that can arise from within the fastest computer in the world. That quote-unquote fastest computer is not a computer per se. I discovered that the fastest computer is a virtual supercomputer that is an internet de facto. I was in the news headlines because I figured out how to harness the slowest processors in the world and harness them around a new internet and do so to record speeds in supercomputing that were previously unrecorded. I invented the world's fastest computer that computes across a new internet that is a new global network of 2 raised to the power 16 or 65,536 commodity off-the-shelf processors that were equal distances apart from each other and that were identical to each other and that were tightly coupled to each other and that tightly encircled a globe that is shaped like a 16-dimensional hypersphere in 16-dimensional hyperspace. I also envisioned my new global network of 64 binary thousand processors as married together as one cohesive supercomputing machinery and married together by 16 times 2 raised to the power 16 or 1,048,576 bidirectional email wires that were uniform and regular and that were etched onto the 15-dimensional surface of that globe that was shaped like a 16-dimensional hypersphere in hyperspace. In the modern configuration of supercomputers and at 1 foot per email wire, those email wires will total 200 miles of cable. This never before seen internet is called the Philip Emeagwali internet. My Eureka Moment of 8:15 in the morning of the 4th of July 1989 made the news headlines around the globe in 1989 and did so because I was the first person to discover how to compute simultaneously and around a globe, or how to compute around a new internet that is a new global network of tightly coupled processors that shared nothing between each other. That is, I de facto invented the world's fastest computer, and I invented it by discovering how and why parallel processing is the vital technology that will make every supercomputer super. My world's fastest computation occurred after I discovered how to communicate synchronously and do so around a new global network of powers of 2 processors that is called the Philip Emeagwali internet.
Insightful and brilliant lecture.